more about. But one thing I wanted to start, just like power, okay? So I study martial arts. I don't know if I ever told you that. I study Wing Chun, which is a great martial art. It really ultimately is the art of blocking and striking, and the whole story behind it is joint manipulation and things of that nature. Keep going? Okay, just keep going? All right. So anyway, what's interesting is that in the dream, if someone ever were really to do that, something like that, to put the hand in my face, I question whether I should just grab the hand and slam the head to the table, even though I haven't touched me. So I kind of wonder whether I need to let them touch me first or not. But I just started thinking about the whole idea of why I get so upset about it, because in my mind in the dream, I know I can break this fool's hand in a second, but that's gonna get me in jail for assault. So that's the frustration with me. But I don't want to get off on a tangent. I want to talk to you about when you were talking about throwing your problems into Jesus, right? And we were just at one of our cousins' services, Patty, this weekend. God bless her soul. And I just started to go back into it, but we're the old heads. But again, my cousin Patty, one of the my Aunt Elizabeth's eldest daughters, just passed away, but they were in the services. At the end of the services, they were talking to people about, if you haven't been saved yet and you want to, join the church or accept Jesus as your Savior. I found that one of the things my father said to me years ago, and my friends kind of said me something about, you're always quoting your father. Well, my father's been there, so I have him to quote. But he said that if all the prophets of all the world ever got together, all of them, they would disagree about very little. And it's really interesting to me that people can say in the church, unless you accept Jesus as your personal Savior, you cannot enter the kingdoms of heaven. So all the Jews are wrong, all the Muslims are wrong, everybody else in the world is wrong. And unless you believe in Jesus, you're right. I have a problem with that. Well, secondly, in my belief,
I do too. So, but
secondly, in my belief,
it doesn't stop me from doing anything.
Indeed. I'm just saying, talking about that stuff. The idea of that people, waiting for this, heavenly intervention instead of doing anything for themselves, to take charge of their own destiny. But you talked about, what's stopping black folks.
Psychologically, black folks are defeated in Buffalo. I mean, if you ride around
the country,
you ride around Buffalo during Christmas time. How many white Santa Clauses do you see hanging out in front of their houses or whatever the case may be? Do you know what that really means? That means he's the good guy. He's the one that brings the kids the toys. He's the one that da. So your kids are praising him. You done spent all week long fighting these individuals to come home and have them praise someone, you follow, that's been fighting against their daddy.
Right.
That makes no sense to me. Now, I came home once, it's in the police department, right? My kids were small. And I opened the door and I came in the kitchen. There was a miniature Santa Claus that they got out shopping someplace. I didn't say anything to nobody. I just picked it up and I took it down in the basement and I got my black shoe polish. And I colored it. I still got that at my house now. And I colored everything that was white, his face, hands, I colored it black. Okay, I have no white man hanging in my house. Picture, be him or Jesus. I'm on the parole board. My chairman calls me into his office one day. And he's black, a lawyer at that. And he said, I have a problem. He said, what's the problem? He said, you're being accused of discrimination. I said, racism and discrimination. I said, really? Me? What happened? He said, well, I got complaints from some other board members and also from some of the staff that the only pictures you have in your room, in your office, is the pictures of black people. And I just looked at him and I said, so? Well, they said that's discrimination. Wait a minute. Let's reverse that. The only pictures of all those people that you asked me, that told you this, all of them have pictures of just white people in their office. And his eyeballs almost jumped out. He says, I never thought about that. It's a black guy.
Right.
It's a black man. He never thought about that.
I totally understand what you're saying.
It's how you're being conditioned. And he had more education than I have. He was a lawyer, But how he's being conditioned to see certain things.
Well, I've often talked about friends about that, things like, when James Brown came out with I'm Black and I'm Proud, and right. The whole movement of having pride in your own black skin. Like, we grew up with 400 years of slavery and Jim Crow and all the other stuff, believing that our own features were ugly features, that, you know, we were innately ugly. So thusly, we have to tell ourselves we're beautiful and big up ourselves. But I wanted to go into one thing about Christmas. That, and it is as a law enforcement officer, former law enforcement officer, I had seen Alton Maddox, a lawyer, he was speaking years ago, and he was talking about the amount of men who are in jail for trying to rob somebody on Christmas to bring Christmas home to their family. And the idea that, you know, you could be in some messed up relationship with some woman or have problems and all that BS is going on, and because you're not even a man, you're not even bringing Christmas home to your kids. So then some ignorant man with very few choices decides to go stick somebody up to try to bring home Christmas to their family, when, as Maddox said, when having daddy home should be enough Christmas for anybody. But I just want to talk to you about your experience with things of that nature, people doing crimes in the name of trying to do some good. I just want to see if you have any experience with people doing crimes for things of that nature.
Well, I think the average person is doing crime for some reason. There's a reason behind all. He's not just out there doing it. Some may, and which would be a small percentage of them, may be stealing to feed their babies at home. They're a little different than women. You know, to give you a little story about it.
You talked about the one woman prostitute. You talked about that here before.
Okay, it's a little different. The man may very well go out and steal, and he gets caught. He'll say he's doing it for X, Y, and Z, when maybe he's doing it for his drug habit.
Right,
it's still a reason. It's still a reason, okay? But let's go back a little further than that. If we were operating properly in this country, we would have less unemployment. Properly meaning this: how many jobs does the black community itself create for its own workers? Do you understand?
Very few.
Very few. The brother that runs the gas station at Ferry and Jefferson came from Africa. He's somewhere, whether it was in Africa or after he got here, he looked at that corner and he said, wow, I could put a gas station there and make me some money. Now he did, and he's making oodles of money. So he opens up another. He's got one being built down on Broadway and Jefferson right now.
I was wondering what was being built over there. Another Mandela Market.
Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
What happened to the brain power of the black man in this country? What's being built in our name? See, these are private enterprises. You put the money up. Families put it. When my parents came here, they just barely could read and write, but my mom could cook. She opened up her first restaurant. And that was before we moved to South Park almost. So you follow what I'm saying?
Where was this restaurant?
Huh? It was on William Street.
Okay.
William Street was the business.
What was that one called?
It was called Kirkland's Diner.
Okay.
But that's back in the 40s. So the point is, we're not the entrepreneurs in our own community. We should be. If you go over into the Polish community, they're the entrepreneurs in their neighborhood. The Italian community, they're the entrepreneurs in there. The Irish community, and right on down the line. What's wrong with us? Where do we put most of our money?
In entertainment and clothing and BS, right.
Who do we listen to more than anybody else? And we think they're giving us good information when it may be information that's really killing us.
Right.
And you have to think about that, okay? Because we at one time, when I was a kid, we had all these things going for us. And suddenly it stopped for poverty funds. Okay?
Poverty funds came along right around the time with integration.
Well, the legal.
That's what I mean.
The law was changed, yeah.
Is that does one happen after the other, or?
And other changes took place. Well, there's a theory that goes, for every change, there's another change that is more detrimental than the first one, or something like that.
For every action, there's an opposite action, or
yeah,
opposite reaction.
And for every act. So when we got the 1964 Civil Rights Bill passed, we cheered, yay! But there's another group that didn't cheer. What were they doing? What was the reaction? We didn't look at the reaction. So that's the great difference. We're not alert enough to see these kinds of things going on, which we should.
Right.
You see, we don't read enough. We could have the best educated kids in the world if we were to educate some of them. All these churches that we're supposed to have, they should open up schools.
Right.
But we don't have enough pride in ourselves.
Unfortunately, poverty funds came after the riots. Now, why did the riots come?
Well, that was the 60s.
Poverty came
That was the
not
60s.
after integration, but after the riots. Then came the
That-
poverty funds.
Yeah, that was in the 60s.
Are we done? Or,
you keep on rolling.
good,
Yeah.
good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's in the 60s. 64, and the riots were all combined there.
You talked about when we cheered for civil rights happening, and there was another voice that didn't cheer. One of my ex-bosses, when I worked in managers, whatever you want to call them, I worked in Manhattan. We became really good friends, and we would have honest discussions about race and everything. He was a white man. I mean, just real clear, like true, talking honestly about things. Like it got to be really, really interesting conversation. He told me one of the things that he was always ashamed of in life was that he never forgets the fact that when Martin Luther King was shot, that his father, a white man, he actually an Irish man, he had all his boys over and they had drinks and cheered that they killed this nigga.
Sure.
Like, and he always told me how ashamed he was as a kid growing up having that father who was that racist. But you just to reiterate what you're saying about there was a whole parts of people who didn't cheer. But I have a question for you. I'm going to ask you about police brutality, and whether we started talking about this gentleman Gregory Hill who was killed in Florida in his own yard, and the Florida they tried to get sued for money for his kids in the not the criminal case, I can't think of the name of the civil case. They tried to sue to get money for the kids, and the Florida jury gave them $4. And then as we looked at it, we saw the law said that if you're drunk, even if you're at your own house, that you're automatically 50% responsible. And then ultimately, that they punished the family for even suing. But I wanted to ask you about the whole police and the shoot to kill mentality. Is it merely a matter, and you did talk about some of this stuff in your book, whether you started talking about things like the playing guns and things of that nature, but is it the matter of police are trained to shoot to kill, or is it that dead men make bad witnesses?
A combination of both. When you train like this. You're not supposed to pull that gun unless you're aiming to kill. And if you're aiming to kill, you're supposed to be aiming at the biggest part of your body.
All right, the chest.
The chest. You see what I'm saying? You're not in the cowboy movies. You're not shooting at the ankles. And if you're shooting at the leg or ankles, that means your life was not in danger. And that means you shouldn't have been shooting at all. So is that point clear?
Yeah, I got it.
You don't see people aiming at the leg or something of that nature, which I have said many a times. You have opportunities to do that, to stop people. Let's say that someone is standing 20 feet away from you and they're coming at you with a knife, and you got time to shoot at the leg, and if it don't work, then you shoot at the chest because you still got time. But normally the person might be close to you.
Right.
See? So that's the way it's supposed to go. What's the other question?
Well, I was wondering whether it was a matter of the fact that killing a person means they can't be a witness to crime, but maybe you had something illegal you were doing in the first place, so you murdered this person. I don't know. I'm just wondering.
I wouldn't doubt that. I would say that probably sure cases where
dead men make bad witnesses.
Dead man makes bad witnesses, or you take some of these cases where men have shot and killed a cop and they chase them down or something. You get a lot of cases like that where they may say the person committed suicide. Once they cornered him or something. Whether he did or not, we don't know. But you find a large percentage of those kinds of people seem to have been killed themselves or what have you. So you end up taking the word of the police officer. In the academy, I remember being told, how you may shoot someone and you plant a weapon on them to cover yourself, to make it look legal.
Right. That's in your book.
But let's go back to black people. Many blacks are as guilty as whites today when the shooting of black people now. Many. They go in not as black men understanding their own culture, but they go in and join that culture that's there, if that makes sense to you. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, when they go on the force, they become almost just like the policemen that are there. They're trained to be that. They're trained to see the way they see, instead of bringing a real true type of integration there, okay? And that means you coming from a different perspective. You coming from a group of people who've been abused, and that should be centered in your mind. And when you join an organization, you should be thinking in terms of how can I change this? Right. How can I add my 2 cents into this? Let's take a police commissioner, for example. If a black goes into a police department, those laws and everything were made by white people, the policies, then he should have some input and change some of those laws if they don't apply to black people equally.
Well, they're good for black. Yeah, right.
You see what I'm coming from? But if you just go in there and sit on that job and get a big paycheck and sit there for a TV audience,
what good are you doing?
what good are you? You just want to put a white guy back in there.
Right.
If you're not, the same thing on the school system. If you're going to educate black children, why go in and use the same curriculum, that whites put up for white kids?
Right.
You have to put something that our kids understand and teach from that perspective. And you're educating the teachers. See, the average black person that goes into any institution, black teaching is, they're probably overly qualified than whites. Because you go in knowing how your people are, plus you've been educated to know how whites are. Because the whole educational system is that way. Whereas the white person comes on, all he knows is being white.
Right. Back in the day, I used to always talk about the idea that, the education isn't paid for by the state to make us the brightest and best brilliant people we can be as individuals. It's to keep the system working. That's why we're educated to be good enough. That's why, we line up in lunch lines so we can learn how to sit in the bank line and be patient, that kind of thing. But the other thing I wanted to get into was and I know we're closing out, we're about to be done, we got like a minute left, but when they started talking about some of the responses, like for example, police being called on black people in Starbucks for or whatever, or the young girl who fell asleep on her dorm or the hall at Yale. And the cops were saying that when you call the police, you are basically bringing a lethal situation into a non-lethal situation. Right. And the reality is that people need to stop calling these people who are trained in lethal response to situations that aren't warranting that.
I agree.
Well, it's been great having you here. Thank you. I'm sorry.
I agree, but let me just add this.
Please.
Add this point here. That's where I was referring to a minute ago. You take your ideas and your views into the system, or they're going to continue to use those legal means that they have, and that is to shoot. A woman comes at them with a knife in their hand. You may be used to seeing that in the hood, and you may be used to talking to them. Baby, come on, put that knife down. Stop acting a fool. You could do that. They come in, knife, boom, bang. You see what I'm saying? They're taught in the academy. They don't know how to get along in our community. Why? Because the average one's afraid of black people. And that's why you see so many blacks being killed by cops, but they don't want to admit it.
I agree with you. And that even goes to just the people. People aren't used to talking to people, so they see somebody who they perceive as a scary black man, where you can just talk to them, why are you in my parking space? I'm sorry, I didn't see you, whatever. It said, I got this black guy, I'm scared, and you call this lethal response. So same thing. It's not just in the policing, thank you for that point, but it's also in the society in general. Again, this has been The Old Heads. I'm here with Theodore Kirkland, author of Spirit and Soul, The Odyssey of a Black Man in America, available now on Amazon.com. But again, this has been The Old Heads. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, brother, man.
It's been great having you, and we'll see you next time.